Mother, during the first interview, we looked at your life in Oklahoma between the years, of course, 1914 and 1923. 1923 being the year, of course, that you moved with your parents to Lamesa, Texas. During this second interview, I'd like to begin in 1923 in the Lamesa area. And probably in 1935, when you and your future husband, Joe B. Whitlow, returned to Lamesa from Kansas City. So let's see, in 1923, you were 9 years old.
Yes.
And you had moved with your parents to this strange new place called Lamesa, probably a very big town to you at that point, because you were moving from the farm. Can you give me a kind of an idea of your early opinion of the Lamesa area, and did you like it, or were you having a hard time with it, or whatever?
Oh, I don't remember too much about it, except that I did have friends, and I started school, and I met, there were two girls that I was in school with then, that we went all through school and graduated from high school, and we're still friends today.
Oh, really? Are they still in the Lamesa area, do you know?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they still live in Lamesa.
What did your father do when he first went there? What was his occupation?
Well, the first thing he did was work on the railroad as a section hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So the train went through Lamesa?
it didn't go through.
Okay.
It went from Slayton to Lamesa, and then it turned around and it went back.
I see. So it was a dead end.
But the tracks had to be kept in good shape, and so that's part of the thing that he did. He went with some other men, and they would ride on a thing.
Oh, where they pump a pump car or something?
Out to where they were going to work on the tracks, and then they'd take it off and they'd work on the tracks. And then part of the time he worked as a carpenter's helper and some other things.
Did he ever farm in Lamesa?
1 year. only.
1 year. Did the drought get him again?
Yes, it did. And one time he worked as the ranches were being sold for farms during that time, and it was ranch land, and there were mesquite trees on the land, and so they had to be dug up for the farming.
Oh.
And they didn't have heavy equipment in those days, so he would go out with other men, and they would dig up first they'd cut the trees down. They weren't very big trees.
No,
and
but they had deep roots, I understand.
They'd cut them down, and then they would dig out the roots. That was called grubbing.
Oh my goodness! I think that they would use chains and probably a horse to pull out the roots, most likely.
They may have. I really don't remember.
That sounds like just back-breaking work.
Yes.
Did your mother have an occupation at this time, or
Not
did
at
she
that
just
time. Later on, about the time I was in high school, she worked at the steam laundry.
Well, it sounds like you adjusted very well. Did you live in one house the whole time, or did you change houses during that time? Or
at first, we rented rooms. They called it. You'd call it an apartment today. And then my daddy, with the help of some other men, built a house. And we lived there until I was in high school, and then we bought another house and moved there.
Did these houses have bathrooms?
The first one didn't. I remember when they put in the sewerage in that part of our town, and they were putting in the indoor bathrooms. My daddy said, "We're not going to have a toilet in our house." But Mother convinced him that that was the modern way. But he built it in the very farthest corner of the house.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. I guess it worked okay because y'all kept it.
Yes.
Do you recall whether you had electricity at that time or whether you had batteries for electricity or anything at your house at that point?
I think we had coal oil lamps. I really don't remember too much about them, about it.
Yeah.
We may have had electricity. I just don't remember.
What about an ice box? Do you remember if you had an ice box in
No.
Little Mesa?
No, we didn't have, not at that time. Now later on we did, and about the time I was in high school, but at that time.
So everything.
My mother had a cow when we lived
Oh,
there.
she did.
Uh-huh. She
Did
milked.
she, I don't suppose she brought her cow from Oklahoma, did she?
No, I think they must have bought another one.
Okay. Uh, what about your church there? I guess you probably were a member of the First Baptist Church in La Mesa at that point?
Yes,
or
we
what?
started going to church, and my daddy didn't go much because he was hard of hearing.
Right.
But he was a very devout Christian, and he kept the Sabbath day. And I joined the church when I was about 10 years old.
Where were you baptized?
In a stock tank.
In a stock tank.
It was right behind the church. It was outside, but it was...
Probably a stock tank maybe underneath the windmill or something.
No, I don't think there was a windmill there. I don't know where they got the water. But
So there was obviously some stock behind the, some livestock behind the church.
no, I don't think so. I think they just brought the tank in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, probably
I called it a stock tank because it was that type of
donated by some farmer or something to the
Probably.
church, probably. So you finished high school in 1931, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you graduate with any honors or anything like that?
Yes, I was one of 6. There were 76 in our class, and I was one of 6 who were honored for making the honor roll
Oh,
every month for the 4 years I was in high school.
wow. That's did that get you any scholarships to college or anything like that?
No,
But you did go
I wasn't the top one. I was the bottom of the 6th.
well, that's still very good. Did you? But you did go on to college at that point.
Yes.
But now, did you break your ankle prior to going to college or after?
Yes. The summer after I graduated from high school, I was playing baseball with some friends, and I was running to the base and just fell in an awkward position and broke my ankle.
Oh.
So I was in a cast most of the summer.
Along about the same time you and your parents moved to La Mesa, there was another family that moved to La Mesa also, the Whitlow family.
Yes.
Of course, this would turn out to be your future husband. But did you meet him at when they first moved to La Mesa, or did you know anything about him or anything?
No. Now, I was told that they moved there also in 1923, and they bought a farm south of La Mesa and lived there. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I met him and married him.
That seems remarkable that in a town probably, 4,000 or 5,000 people, that you would miss him for 10 years and then finally end up meeting him and marrying him.
That's right.
Well, we'll get into that story in a little bit. But did you take any trips like with friends before you went to college or after you went to college or do anything that you remember from that time frame?
Well, one summer, I had some cousins, their parents, who lived at a place called Creswell, north of Plainview.
Okay.
It was just a little country church. And my cousin was going to be leading the singing at a revival there.
Oh, okay.
He was married and had a baby, but he had some brothers who were not married. And they needed somebody to play the piano. So they came and got me, and I went and stayed with them for a couple of weeks and played the piano.
Excuse me, now, where did you learn to play the piano? Was that in Oklahoma or in the early days in La Mesa? Or what?
In La Mesa, I took piano lessons.
Take any other kind of lessons too at that time?
No.
Uh, so when you were in Plainview, you were there for about a week?
We were there 2 weeks. They used to have longer
Oh.
revivals than they do now. And it was quite a nice experience for me. We were invited out for dinner every day at some of the farm homes.
Oh, I bet that was fun.
And there were other young people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And one boy that I kind of liked.
Now, this wasn't Joe Bailey, was it?
No. His name was B. Anyway, my cousin liked the girl that he was going with.
Oh, okay.
So we kind of broke that up. George started going with Mildred, and I went with B during that time. And later, George and Mildred married.
But not you and B?
No.
Oh, goodness. Well, now, how long did you stay at Texas Tech, at college at Texas Tech in Lubbock?
Just a year.
Just a year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I went that fall. And I stayed with a family.
Okay.
And babysat with their 2 children,
Mm-hmm.
and worked, helped to keep house for my room and board
Oh, okay.
during the time I was there.
Mm-hmm. What kind of courses were you taking at Texas Tech?
Education,
Okay.
and English, and the basic.
Mm-hmm.
And my grades were not as good as Tech's were, but they were okay.
But you decided to drop out of Texas Tech after the first year, and what did you do then?
Well, I taught school for a year. The
Back in La Mesa?
Yes. Country school out from La Mesa.
What was the name of the school?
Weaver.
Weaver, okay. That would have been like northwest of La Mesa.
It was west of La Mesa.
West of La Mesa. But I remember there being a Weaver Ranch west
Yes.
of La Mesa, so
Yes.
that's probably where the
A
school's
very big
name came
ranch
from.
out there.
Yeah. Did you drive at that time? Did you have a car or anything like that?
No, not at that time.
Okay. When did you get your first car?
When I was teaching school,
Oh, okay.
that's when I got the car.
Okay. So you were finally making enough money to get a new car, or get a car at that point.
Yeah, a car.
Now, tell us what Joe Bailey was doing during this time. That, of course, you all had not met, but can you kind of bring us up to date on what he was doing at this time?
Well, now, when I was in grammar school,
Mm-hmm.
my daddy rented a farm
Mm-hmm.
out from La Mesa, and I stayed in town with my aunt and uncle to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And also, at that time, they didn't have a lot of transportation, and they did not have high schools in the rural schools.
Okay.
So everybody that lived in the country had to more or less stay in town with somebody during the school term.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was staying with my aunt and uncle, there were some boys that were staying across the street, high school boys.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And there were 4 or 5 of them. Mm-hmm. And I knew the boys were over there, but I didn't know who they were or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And as it so happened, one of them was Joe Bailey.
Oh.
And so we were across the street from each other, but of course I was still in grammar school, and I did not meet him at that time.
I see. So did he? And he was going to then. Let me see. You said that was during the grammar school time.
Yeah, I was in grammar
Did he end up going to high school in La Mesa or
Yes,
someplace else?
At that time, he was. That was when
Oh, that's the time that he was going to high school.
He was going to high school.
I see.
In La Mesa at that time.
Okay, now you were kind of coming up on the Depression at that point.
Oh yes.
That would have been what, about 1929 or 1928 or?
31. I graduated in 1931.
Okay, I'm behind.
That was during the Depression.
That was okay.
Well,
yeah, that was
prior
during.
to that a few years. I
Right.
really don't know exactly the date.
So, did Daddy? Did he finish high school, or did he have to start working at that point?
Well, he didn't quite finish. He went to Kansas City, Missouri, to go to trade school.
Oh, okay. And what kind of a school?
He worked on batteries and automotive.
Well, that was the coming thing.
Yes.
At that time,
Yeah.
that was probably uh, the the most technical you could get. You know, at that point was on automobiles and batteries and things.
During the time he was in high school, I think he had worked at an automotive shop, and that was where he was encouraged to go to Kansas City to go to school.
Well, it actually turned out to be a good decision. You know,
Yes.
you and I both know. But so he went to Kansas City unbeknown to you.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't even know him at that point.
And he went to school up there, and then he got a job, and he worked up there
Okay.
for a few years. I really don't know how long.
And then he returned to
And then
La
he
Mesa.
returned to La Mesa.
And he started working at a filling station
Yes.
at that point, mainly with batteries, though.
Yes, he repaired batteries and charged them. See, at that time, they didn't have electricity in the country.
Right. Oh, okay.
And the people that had lighting depended on batteries for the lighting. And
So
they
those-
would bring the batteries in to La Mesa to be charged, and he'd put them on the line and charge them. Sometimes he'd have as many as 100 batteries on the line at one time.
So that was a big business.
Oh, yes.
It sure was.
And
But-
then, too, he repaired the batteries. If there was some that was maybe there's more than one cell in a battery, and maybe if one cell was bad, well, he would repair it.
You know, I would venture to say that he was probably the only man in La Mesa that knew how to do that at that
Yes.
point, because that was new technology.
He had learned that when he went to school, at trade school in Kansas City.
Okay, so you had a car, and he was working at a filling station. That must have been how y'all met. Is that correct?
Yes, it was my uncle's filling station.
Okay.
So I went there to get gas. And he would make it a point to wait on me. And I'd make it a point to go quite often to get the gas. And so that's where we met.
Oh, that's neat. So y'all started dating at that point.
Yes.
Do you remember? What you did on your dates? Whether you went to movies or picnics or whatever.
We went to picnics and to movies. And one time we went out to the Weaver Ranch and shot jackrabbits.
No.
At that time there were lots and lots of jackrabbits in that area, and they were a nuisance to the farmers.
Yeah.
So that was, we just did that one time.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was, there was another couple that went with us, and of course we got lost. That was part of the,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sure that was part of the plan.
I'm sure it probably was. It'd be pretty hard to get lost, really lost in West Texas. So you married in 33?
Yes.
So he asked you to marry him. You obviously said yes. And then what did you do for your honeymoon at that point?
Well, we went back to Kansas City.
Oh, you went back to Kansas City. First of all, before we get into Kansas City, where were you married and by whom and all of that?
We were married in our pastor's home,
Oh, okay.
and his mother and dad and my mother and daddy were the only other people there. But I guess that was enough to make it official, because it lasted for 60 years.
Yeah, I would say it was official. What was his mother and dad's name, and Joe Bailey's mother and dad's name?
His dad's name was Mosley, but his mother called him Mose,
Okay,
and his mother's name was Mary.
Mary.
Her maiden name was Jordan.
And what about brothers and sisters? Did Joe Bailey have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, he had, there was Ruby and Cleo and Arthur, and Joe Bailey was the youngest.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you got married and you were off to Kansas City. How did you get to Kansas City?
Well, we went in my car.
Okay.
I had a car and he had $100.
Boy, y'all were set for life, weren't you?
Of course, in that time, $100 was worth a lot more than it is today.
Yeah, it sure was. I doubt if there were very many people in the Depression time that had $100 in their pocket.
That was definitely during the Depression time.
Yeah. I've heard stories about traveling, of your travel up to Kansas City, and that your car used a lot of oil. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I've heard stories that Daddy put like gallons of oil, in the trunk to be able to make it to Kansas City. Well, gee, moving to Kansas City again, like moving from Oklahoma to Lamesa, moving from Lamesa to Kansas City, had to be a major change.
Yes, it was.
Can you give me an idea of where you stayed and what the streets looked like and some of the activities and scenes that you saw in those early days in Kansas City?
Well, I remember when we got there, the crew at the shop, he went back to work at the same shop he had worked at.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. That was Best Tire and Battery?
Best Tire and Battery.
Mm-hmm.
And the crew there had already received our marriage license.
Oh.
It had been mailed to him to the shop, and so they already knew that he was married and was bringing a new bride. So they were ready for him.
I bet they were. Yeah.
Anyway, we rented an apartment in a home of an older lady, and most of the homes there had a basement,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe 1 or 2 or 3 stories.
Mm-hmm.
They had the basements because it was very cold in Kansas City in the
Oh,
wintertime.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And most of the the garages were in the basement, and also the furnace.
Yes.
And then in the summertime, it was hot.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we'd even sleep outside
Oh, you would.
because it'd be hot.
Kind of give me an idea of a street scene out in front of your apartment. Starting in the morning time, or what do you remember about it?
Well, the vendors would go and begin early in the morning.
Now, were they in cars or were
They were in wagons.
Oh, in wagons, horse-drawn wagons.
Horse-drawn wagons, and they would come down the streets and hollering out whatever they had to sell.
Oh.
Vegetables or fruits or bakery goods, or and I remember some of them saying, "Haul in trash."
So they would pick up your trash that way?
Yeah, you'd pay them, to pick up your trash, or you would go out and buy whatever you wanted to buy for your lunch. And the milk was delivered to the door in those days.
That had to be quite a scene.
Well, it's quite different from what it is today.
I would have loved to have seen a scene like that. The only way we get to see them nowadays is in movies. And of course, some of them are done very well, and I've always just been fascinated by those type of street scenes.
And he would work one shift, like from 7 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. And then the next week he would work like 2 in the afternoon until 9 that night. And another couple and us sometimes would go out to Swope Park and cook our breakfast out there.
That's called Swope Park?
Yes.
It's probably still there too, isn't it?
Yes, and it was, at that time, it was one of the biggest parks in the United States.
Oh, it was.
And during that time, there was not the crime that we have today.
Don't tell me that you slept out there.
Sometimes we did.
Sometime you would. It was that safe, eh? Times have changed for the worse in that.
I remember when we first went to Kansas City. We married on December the 12th.
Okay.
And when we got up there, well, the Christmas lights they had a lot of Christmas lights, which I had not seen a lot of before.
No.
And we went downtown to a place or the street was called Petticoat Lane.
Oh, that's cute. I like that name.
And the streets were lighted, and to me that was a wonderful sight. Of course, I was kind of like from a small town
Oh,
to
yeah.
the city.
I don't, this is a question that I don't know if you can answer or not. Do you remember whether those lights were electric or whether they were candles?
Oh, they were electric.
They were electric, okay,
Yes.
I see.
See, that was in 1933.
And you had a telephone in the hallway, you say, in your apartment?
Yeah, the lady that lived there lived on the first floor. And then there was a landing between there and the second floor. We lived on the second floor, and her telephone was there. And we used it whenever we wanted.
Now, you didn't work up there.
No.
Okay, so you probably took Daddy to work and picked him up? And
Yeah.
Were you ever late?
One time I was.
One time you were late, okay.
Yes, I decided I'd go to the show.
Oh, okay.
So I went to the show, and I looked at my watch wrong, and the show was a little bit longer than I had thought it was going to be anyway. But anyway, when I got out of the show and went to pick him up at the shop was closed, and he was out in front, walking up and down.
Oh, I bet he was worried.
He said, "Why, child, where have you been?" So I didn't do that anymore.
Oh, goodness.
But anyway, it was a lot of fun
Yeah.
for him to take me around and show me things in the area. And I've been very fortunate. When I was a child, my parents looked after me. When I was married, Joe Bailey looked after me. And now my children and grandchildren look after me.
Well, I could turn that around and say that you've looked after us, as much as we've looked after you. You had some time on your hands, of course, when Daddy was at work. Did you do anything, like take any lessons or anything like that?
Yeah, I took swimming lessons.
Oh, okay.
First time I learned to swim at the YWCA.
So you didn't do any swimming in stock tanks back in La Mesa?
No, I didn't. And I also took tap dancing.
Tap dancing? Okay. How long did you and Dad stay there in Kansas City? Was it a long period of time or a pretty short period of time?
A year and a half.
Year and a half. Okay. You were probably kind of getting homesick, probably for your parents and friends back home. And is that why you moved back?
Well, Dad, and I think he just decided he wanted to put in his own business.
Well,
And,
obviously, the back in La Mesa would probably be the most opportunity for that.
yeah, it was nice to go back where our family was.
Sure. Now, so y'all moved back, came back in your same car,
Yes. Yeah.
and then he put in a battery shop back in the same filling station. Is that correct?
Yes, and for a while.
What, for a couple of 3
let's see.
years or so?
Well,
You came.
not very long.
Yeah.
And then he built his own building.
Oh, and that was been in about 1938, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
And when we first moved back, we lived in a apartment for a while, and then we rented a house. And my daddy built us a cabinet,
Oh, okay.
and some of the family gave us some cast off furniture,
Sure.
and so we lived there for a while. But by 1938, he had built a new building at his new business. We had a new home, and we had a new baby.
Ooh, y'all were on your way at that point, weren't
That's right.
That's and like they say, the rest is history. But there's still a lot of history to go, and we want to get into those years in detail next time. Between 1938 and however far we get, 45 or 50 or whatever, and we'll get into that next time. But I want to thank you very much for sharing this part of your life with us, and we'll talk about the days after you were a mother, next time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's been a pleasure.